Hi, my name is Scott Yearling. I'm a senior at Purdue University, and I thought I'd show you a real quick effect on how to light your finger on fire like this. Alright, so to start off, we're going to drag our footage into our composition. This is a simple shot. I just took my phone and I snapped my finger and put a little green dot on the side. Alright, so we're going to drop it down to this little icon where it says create new composition, and doing this will create a new composition with the exact width and height, frame rate, and time as the footage that we have here. The next step is to motion track this footage. So using that green dot I have on my finger, we're going to click on our footage, go to animation, track motion. This will create a little square within a larger square, and what basically the smaller square does is finds an area of pixels and will try to look for that within the area of the larger square. We have our settings over here. This play button here will track forward while the other one will do it by a single step, and you can go forward and backwards. Tracking forward here will give us the location of that green dot for each of those frames, as you can see there. So we're just going to go forward and do that. Alright, so a little bit of time later, you can see I've done some more tracking and I've sped it up a little bit. But once we get this dot tracked, we're going to go to our layers panel and hit a new null object, which is basically an empty layer, has nothing on it. We're going to hit edit target and make sure that null 1 is selected, and then hit apply. Make sure that the dimensions are x and y. And this takes the location data from our tracker to the null object, and you can see the position is saved. Okay, next what you want to do is go online and find a asset for fire. I found this one. It's pretty easy to do. Just search fire assets, After Effects. You'll either find some like this that are already have the background removed for you, and if they have a black background, which is what you want, you just simply change the layer mode to screen. But I have found this one, and we're going to just tie its location to the null object so that it moves with it. And then we're basically just going to scale it down and move its position so it looks like it's on the tip of my finger. Next, we're going to add the liquefy effect to our flame layer. This will essentially let you smudge the flame to your finger and kind of contort it so it looks like it's emitting from its position. So as you see, we're going in here and just making sure that it is as smooth as possible to the finger. Sped it up a lot. This will take you some time, and just kind of get so it looks good to you. It doesn't have to be super specific or anything. You play back and you can see what we have. For this next step, we are going to set the layer mode to overlay so we can see through it. And you can kind of get a little bit of my finger in the background. Now we want to actually make it look like the flame is casting light on my finger, so we're going to take the pen tool and create a little tiny shape around the tip of my finger, and we're just going to reduce the transparency. Next, we are going to pick whip this to our null object so that it moves with our object. Put a key under the path of the shape layer and scroll to the end of the flame effect and set another keyframe. This will automatically adjust the path to match over the course of the duration of the flame. However, it's not exact, so we're going to set another keyframe in the center, and then again in the center between the first two, and again so forth until we have something that matches up with our finger pretty well over the duration. Next, we're going to duplicate our original footage and set the shape layer directly above that, and change the track matte to alpha. And this will make it so that our shape layer is actually blocking out everything other than what is inside of it for that layer. Next, we're going to set that layer to add, and this will kind of create the glowing effect that we're looking for. Next, we are going to add a fast box blur to the shape layer to get rid of those hard edges. Just turn the blur radius up a little bit. It's kind of one of those things that you want to eyeball just because it looks good for me doesn't mean it'll look good for you. Play it out, make sure it looks good. This next part I sped up a little bit. It's just adjusting the blurriness of the shape layer and the transparency to allow more of the footage underneath to come through. Going for something that looks like it's glowing hot from the flame. That looks pretty good. Next we're going to be snuffing out the flame at the end. So you want to make sure that you have your opacity keyframed for what you want it to be for the duration of the shot. And then set those keyframes near the end. Go to the very end of your footage and turn it all the way down. If you don't do it quick enough, then it'll just look like it fades away. So if it's a flame snuffing out, you want them to be pretty close together, like so. Next we're going to add an adjustment layer on top of our footage to make it look like the area around the flame is flickering. To do this, we are going to insert an adjustment layer and add the hue and saturation effect to it. Just going to bump up the saturation, maybe mess with the lightness a little bit, however you think it needs to be. But we're not doing it for the entire shot, so it's important to go up to our Eclipse tool. Just go up to this spot right here and hold down if you don't see it. It'll reveal more options. And by holding down Shift, we're just going to draw over a circle. And as you can see here, it's already masked to be within. You can toggle the inverted to see what the outside would look like. We're just going to mess with these options a little bit. Here you can feather it so it's not such a hard line. Even mess with the size of the feather through mask expansion if you want to change that. And lastly, just make sure it is tied to null 1. The flame's looking a little bit dim right now, so we're going to add a glow effect to the overlay layer of the fire. You can mess around with the threshold to get it to the brightness that you might like. The lower, the brighter. You can also adjust the radius to change how far out it goes. It's just a lot of tinkering and eyeballing. You should be able to find something similar to this. Now that we have all of our layers in here, we're just going to make some final adjustments. I did add a brightness and contrast to the second fire layer, just to have the ability to tinker with it more. But a lot of this is just eyeballing. You can see I've changed the transparency of the shape layer a little bit to make it look more natural. Going in with the liquefy effect again just to make sure it looks the way you want. I did keyframe the liquefy effect so that it does move with my finger. That way it's not a stagnant image. I wasn't happy with the original fire layer being set to add, so I went in and adjusted it to be set to pin light, which gives it a little bit more of the finger coming through, but we can change that a little bit more by going into the fire layer itself and masking out the bottom of it with a feathered mask. Going down to the very bottom. You can press F or press M to open your mask and find the feather. And just going to feather it, and when you come back to the original footage, you can see that it's letting a lot more of that finger through, which is helping out a lot for the effect. Lastly, we are going to get rid of this dot on my finger. It's not super necessary, but at the same time, you want a seamless effect. So I've created a shape, and we're going to go in and grab the color of my finger. And we also want to add a blur to the shape layer so that it's not a hard edge and kind of syncs it with my finger a little bit. I've added a fast box blur, but you could also use a Gaussian blur. Just turn it up so the edges aren't super obvious. We're going to go in and keyframe the path once we've converted it to a Bezier path. And this will let us move around these dots as we need to. If you deselect it by accident, just select on path again and it'll let you grab it. Sped this up. We're going frame by frame with my finger and making sure it's matched up. It's a little bit tedious, but that's a lot of what compositing is. The color here doesn't seem to match up, so I'm grabbing the color on this frame. If we copy this later, it'll have the same key points that we've laid out before for the path. So all we're going to do is split it using Control D or Control Shift D. Make sure that they are their own layers. Top one is going to be the lighter color of skin, and the lower one is going to be the darker. They're going to switch over at a point where you won't really be able to see because it's moving so fast. And that looks pretty good. Lastly, we're going to render it. You can render this however you like. I like to use MOV files for this. So you're going File, Export, Add to Render Queue. I'm going to change it from lossless to QuickTime. Everything else looks okay. Let that render, and you're all done.